Well, we finally got some news on Exodus, courtesy of Hasbro's Q3 earnings call. There's also a brief Founders Q&A to go through, so let's get started. And I won't bury the lead, you can now wishlist Exodus on all the platforms on which it will be available, that is PlayStation, Xbox, Steam, and the Epic Store. Chad Robertson, co-founder and general manager of Archetype Entertainment, made the announcement at the end of the latest Founders Q&A. He also said that we'd be learning more about the game by the end of the year, and we learned just exactly where and when that was going to be during Hasbro's Q3 earnings call. During the call, Chris Cox, Hasbro's CEO, confirmed that Exodus would be coming to the Game Awards this December. He says the Game Awards this December will showcase some new announcements from Hasbro, including updates on our upcoming sci-fi RPG Exodus, further cementing our commitment to innovative digital play experiences. And later in the call, during the question and answer session, we got a little hint as to when Hasbro might be thinking about releasing the game. During a discussion on pricing, someone says, "It seems like we're about a year away from Exodus being released." So while that's certainly not a hard and fast date, and it can always slip, it looks like Hasbro is at least thinking about a holiday 2026 release. But for now, along with the wishlist announcement, they did drop some new key art and a few new screenshots. Now, as far as the Founders Q&A, we did get a few more details about the gameplay, June, our protagonist, and some of the tools that we'll be using. They begin with a question about what games they've drawn inspiration from for Exodus, and Chris King, game director for Exodus, lists the usual suspects, including Mass Effect. He says the two games share a lot of DNA, including the epic space opera aspect, as well as choices that carry over from game to game. Now, we've always known they wanted this IP to be used for more than just one video game. After all, they've already got one novel out, with another one on the way, but it's interesting and good to note that at least they're thinking about having choices that can be carried over into another game. Of course, all of that will depend on how well the game performs, but at least they seem to be thinking about it. For combat, they said they took some inspiration from the Horizon series. They mentioned that sometimes we'll have to take into account the construction of the enemies that we're up against to determine the best tools and the best ways to defeat them. They also mentioned the Metroid games when talking about the obstacles we're going to have to try to get around. Now, I don't know anything about these games, but Chris King says that again we'll have to try to figure out the best tools to get around these obstacles. To the question of what inspired the tools and weapons of Exodus, Chris King says that there are a lot of tools, but one of the things that inspired them was the idea of a Swiss Army knife. So the idea is that you're not going to have a lot of room to have a lot of different equipment, so you need to cram as much utility into one piece of equipment as you possibly can. And this concept has inspired a lot of ideas, but he said one of the coolest is the gun that we'll be carrying, which is called a recycler. He compares it to Back to the Future's flux capacitor, so that you can stuff just any old thing into it, and it can craft any number of different materials, so you don't have to carry around a lot of ammo. And as if that weren't enough, the gun itself can also transform. Transform into what? They didn't say. Next, someone after my own heart asked about how stealth is going to be implemented, and they did say that, yes, stealth is a viable way to play. They have a couple of companions who are dedicated to stealth, as well as a lot of things in our toolkit to help us sneak around. But he stresses that if you don't like stealth, then you don't have to do stealth. You can, he says, shoot everything in the face, or maybe you can talk your way out of combat. And all that sounds great to me. Next up, we have a question about how the game is going to handle the remnants that we're hunting down. Someone asks, will the game explore whether these relics are dangerous or morally questionable to use? Chad Robertson says yes, but the more complexity is less about the technology itself, rather it's about how June chooses to use the technology. Complicating matters will of course be our companions who may have different opinions on how to use these items. And according to Chris King, how we decide to use this technology is going to make up some of the most consequential choices that we'll be making in the game. Next, someone asked how they wanted combat to feel, and Chris King said they want it to be both cinematic and strategic. He says, for example, they took some inspiration from the infiltration trope that you find in a lot of sci-fi movies. Because you're facing an overwhelming force and you can't just go in guns blazing through the front door, you need to observe, plan, and execute. And then, because no plan survives encounter with the enemy, you suddenly have to improvise. Now, he does say not every combat encounter is going to go like that, but they really do want to lean into player choice on how you do things. Then someone asked about how enemies evolve during the game, and of course they say that early game we'll be fighting mostly humans, but after we get our spaceship, things are going to change and we're fighting far more dangerous foes. They also talk a little more about the Rot, which is a techno-virus, which is slowly destroying all of this celestial technology that's keeping Leiden going, as well as corrupting all the other technology that you're also using. And this is going to worsen and change things as you go through the game, and make enemies more dangerous than they already are. And finally, someone asked about side quests in Exodus. And Chad Robertson states very vehemently that in Exodus, side quests are not filler content. Through side quests, we'll be able to improve our relationships with our companions, find cool stuff, buff up our skills, and learn more about the world. All the things good side quests should do. So all in all, this was a pretty good Q&A, and as I've said before, these guys keep saying all the right things. And considering the pedigree of the people involved, we know they can deliver. So we're pretty excited to find out what they're gonna show off during the Game Awards in December. But let us know what you think in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, why not like and subscribe for more content like this. As always, thanks for watching.